it or not. Um, the I had to draw a line somewhere, so I said the plants have to have survived in my garden for at least 3 years. And that would eliminate all the plants that I tried and put them in the wrong place, and so they didn't survive. I'll show you what some of those are. And I'm looking for plants that have some good design value. They have lovely blooms or distinctive foliage. And of course, they all have to have ecological value. And I came up by categories. You see there some shrubs, grasses, ground covers, perennials, and both sun and shade. I didn't do trees because the list is pretty short and they're all great. So I couldn't really tell that apart. And in case you're wondering, yes, that purple, lovely purple flower on the screen there is is going to be one of the favorites. So I'm going to start with shrubs. And I'm going to start with this particular shrub because this was the first native shrub I planted in my yard before I really knew anything at all about what I was doing. We went to the nursery and there was a little section called native shrubs, and I picked 3 beach plums and planted them on a slope right in front of some red cedars in a grouping. And I believed, like a lot of novices do, that if you plant native plants, you don't have to water them or take care of them, which of course is not true. You have to water them just like any other plant for the first year till they get established. But I didn't know that. So I might have watered this shrub twice in the first year. And then I didn't water it. I've never watered it again. And it's grown to be these giant beach plums that bloom these gorgeous white blooms every spring. And it's like the highlight of my spring to walk out and see these beach plums in the standing out on this slope against all the evergreens. I liked it so much I bought 5 more of them and put them up in my meadow, and they're doing great too. So these plants are great for full sun, dry, sandy soil, and with very little care once they're established. And I've even gotten fruit from this a couple of times, but I'm usually not quick enough. The birds get it before I do. So I mean, this grows big enough if you have the right conditions. I would think it would make a great hedge or kind of a nice privacy screening kind of shrub as well. Here's my second shrub which is sweet fern. It's not a particularly showy plant. It has really interesting leaves, as you can see in the close-up there. It has a lovely scent to it if you brush the foliage. It's got a nice rounded shape. It doesn't grow too fast. It doesn't it prefers sun and part shade. It kind of this growth is a little pokey in full shade. I have this in 1, 2, 3, 4 different places in my garden, and we planted it at the mini meadow at the Mayo house as well, and it's loving it there too. If it's happy, it will colonize and it will continue to grow and expand, and the colonies look even better than the single plant, so it's this is another one that I love walking by and just brushing my hand on the leaves and bringing out that scent. This one, the bayberry, is kind of special to me. Well, not only because it's a great plant, but because this was the first native plant that I ever identified on my own property. I'm walking around with a guidebook and the plant identification thing to try and figure out what was growing on the back of our property. And this was the first one I figured out. I knew the red cedar, but this is the first shrub I figured out. And I have a lot of these on my property. I have not bought and planted any of them. They all occur naturally. And which I love. And they grow in all sorts of conditions. Mostly part shade is where they seem to grow best. And It's the distinctive leaves on them that I think that appeals to me the most. Um, I almost never see the blooms, but I happened to be out there one day with a camera on the day that they were blooming and caught this beautiful picture. It will colonize and self-seed, although relatively slow, and it stays as a fairly narrow plant. It doesn't expand widthwise, but it will grow up. Some of the older plants on the property have trunks about 8 feet tall and a few leaves at the top, and they're still alive and doing well. And eventually, a couple of those have died off, and new plants have grown from the base, which is which I love a lot too. This is the one that is not native to the Cape. I think you all know there are no hydrangeas native to the Cape, um, but there are two hydrangeas that are native in the southeastern United States, and they do well on the Cape. So I grow both of them. Um, this is one of them, the oak leaf hydrangea, and it gets to be a good sized shrub. So another opportunity for like a screening shrub, a screen or a hedge. I had somebody who was going to take out a whole hedge of um, butterfly bush and wanted a big shrub to replace it with. And this is going to turn out, the oak leaf hydrangea is going to turn out to be a really good alternative for that. It likes part shade, dry to average soils, not too deep a shade. I had one plant that was in a deep shade. I moved it to something that was part sun, part shade, and it's just taken off, which is really great. And what I love about this are the leaves. The leaves make this plant. It has the white flowers like the panicle hydrangeas do, but it's the leaves are so interesting. They've got that deep indentation, so they're beautiful as they emerge and all through the summer, and then they get this wonderful burgundy color in the fall. If you don't have one of these in your garden and you have a good spot for it, don't hesitate. A lot of people think of these as weedy or not very attractive. I've not found that at all. So the second native plant I planted, a native shrub I planted, 10 years ago when I was first starting, was this one, the sweet pepper bush, the Clethra alnifolia. Um, it's a great shrub because it blooms later in the summer when very few other shrubs are in bloom. So if you want something with larger format that has blooms in the summer, this is the way to go. The native species, the straight species, is a big shrub. It's at least 4 feet tall. Mine is 6, and it's probably 6 by 6 is when it reaches its full growth. There are smaller cultivars available. I've got a couple that are maybe 3 feet high, something like that, and they stay as a small shrub. So a grouping of those along a path is a really kind of nice way to use these shrubs. Um, they are pollinator magnets. There's bees all over these plants when they're in bloom. Um, if you're looking for a little bit of color instead of a white bloom, there is a selection of the straight native species called Ruby Spice, and that's the one in the middle on the right. It's a light pink. It is it's a beautiful flower to add to a late summer garden. And and I wanted to just share with you the list of all the other shrubs that I have that I couldn't feature on this because we just don't have time to do the whole thing. You can see it's a pretty long list, and I would recommend any one of them that to use in your garden. I've I've not planted that much with shrubs until I started working with native shrubs, and now I'm a big fan. They're a great way to get a lot of interest in color and ecological value into the garden, especially in spring while they're blooming. And they're actually very easy to maintain. They're not like perennials that need a lot of care and attention, even natives. But I also want to show you for each of these categories which ones I've tried and not succeeded with, and why. On the shrub level, almost all of them have done pretty well. They're pretty tolerant of different kinds of conditions, but the three that failed because of critters. I find that the rabbits will eat anything that is new to your garden. They'll try anything that's new to your garden, and they'll eat any kind of even shrubs that are still have fairly tender twigs on them. And that's what happened to the New Jersey tea and all the low blueberry. The rabbits have eaten all those little twigs down to nubs, and eventually the plants have failed. With the chokeberry, it was the deer that got it. So one more thing that I really don't want to plant anymore because the deer is just going to come eat it, which is too bad because all three of those are great plants. Okay, moving on. I'm a recent convert to using grasses, and one of my favorites is little blue stem. I don't have a ton. I tried some once in a garden bed that I had, but it did well for a couple of years, and I really liked it. But it turns out that that whole garden bed was too moist, and eventually it kind of flopped over and failed to it just kind of withered away and died. So now I'm growing it up in the meadow, and that's what the little baby plants up on the upper left here. Those are the little blue stem from that coming up from seed in the meadow last year. And I have great hopes for that. I've been told that little blue stem and slender mountain mint as a combination are a wonderful combination, and that's what I'm hoping to achieve in one section of the meadow. The slender mountain mint did great, and some of the blue stem was large enough so you could actually tell that it was going to look good. But this year ought to play it out really nicely. Down on the left-hand corner there, though, is a picture I wanted to show you because this was taken in the summer of 22 in the middle of the drought when my lawnmower there was no lawn to mow. So he didn't mow for like 6 or 8 weeks. And there was little blue stem in the mix, and it grew just fine. It came up right through that dead grass. It likes the drought. And so if you're at all concerned about future droughts and you want grasses in your landscape, this is a great one to consider. And they do make cultivars of this now with all sorts of interesting different colors and compositions. So I think most of them do have similar ecological value, but I'm not 100% sure of that. This one's kind of a new one for me. It just barely made the 3-year cut. Purple lovegrass. It's a very unassuming low grass. The leaves of blades are they're a little bit broader. They look not a whole lot different than crabgrass does. It's not quite as weedy and looking, but it's not that far off. But in August, all these seed head comes out and it makes this wonderful purple haze around the top of the plant. And you see it on the sides of the roads everywhere. But it's also a great addition to a home landscape and into a garden, into a vegetable garden. I mean, a ornamental garden. And this, I think, is maybe my absolute favorite grass, prairie dropseed. It is native to the Cape, but it's not common here. So we're stretching it a little bit. But it's a lovely warm season clumping grass. It has very soft, feathery leaves that kind of are very responsive to the wind and the breezes. So there's a lot of motion in the plant. It does well in the drought, and it has those beautiful seed heads in September. So this is, I've used this in as the front border of a bed that has a lot of taller meadow plants in it, and it looks really good there. I'm putting a whole lot more in this year around the edge of a shrub bed that I'm working on further into the property. And in the ground cover world, um, I have to start with my favorite wild strawberry. It's a this occurs naturally. Every piece of wild strawberry you see here has occurred naturally. I have not bought any. I've just cultivated it where it shows up in my yard. I let it run, and if I need it in another part of the yard, I dig some up and move it. And I have all I need. So it grows in sun and part shade, dry to average soils. I'm you're probably all familiar with this plant, the white blossoms in June and the fruit in July. Um, it can be, the middle one shows how it's all intertwined into the lawn. I have a Cape Cod lawn, so not much else grows there. And I welcome the wild strawberry kind of in amongst the grass blades. And if it took over, that would be fine too. On the left, I used it as a underplanting to that's white wood aster in the front and the oak leaf hydrangea in the back. And it was a couple of lessons learned from this little planting here. One is that the rabbits don't like wild strawberry, and they will not cross it to get to a plant that they like. So if you want to protect plants, surround them with wild strawberry, and you'll greatly discourage the rabbits. Normally, rabbits will eat anything in the aster family, so whitewood aster would be problematic, but no problem here. The other lesson learned is I also planted along the bottom, or along the bottom of that picture, some other low-lying plants, the tufted hairgrass, the Dischampsia, and a barren strawberry. And the wild strawberry just ran right over them, and they didn't survive. So I think the lesson learned there is use the wild strawberry when you have taller things that you want to protect. It won't kill the white wood aster at all, or any of the other taller perennials, but I'm not going to plant it again anywhere where I have other low-lying ground covers that I want to protect, because it will take over those. And here's a new favorite. And again, I'm stretching the 3-year rule on this one. Sensitive fern. It grew naturally in my garden, in my yard, kind of in a tucked in corner next to a downspout. And has these wonderful large fronds with shallow divisions, grows in the shade, obviously needs average to wet soils. In the wild, it's found on rich or clay soils. If you've been down the Mill Pond Overlook Trail, the new one off Stage Harbor, there is a huge bed of sensitive fern right in the middle of that entrance corridor, and I encourage you to go take a look at it. It's just gorgeous. Um, what I've taken to doing is digging some of this up from the corner where it grows and trying it in different places in my garden, all in the woodland area. And that's what the two pictures on the right are new plantings, new transplants in the wooded area. And let's see, Christmas fern, another great fern. This one is the most tolerant of the ferns I've tried to drier soils and a little bit of sun. Not a lot. It's not a sun plant by any means. But if you have something that's a little bit lighter than you would expect a fern to survive in, this might do the trick for you. I have it on this is the ground cover in front of a row of the low sweet pepper bush shrubs. And this is filling in all around the base, and it's spreading kind of slowly to do it. But it's on a slope, a north-facing slope that's probably 2/3 shade, a little bit of sun. And I don't water it very much, if at all, and it's doing just fine. And it's nice because it stays green until Christmas, which is where the name comes from. And here's the others, the grasses and sedges and ground covers that I've tried and used in various places. Um, the ones that have failed, well, the Virginia bluebells failed because I think my soil is too acid and perhaps not rich enough. So I think it didn't have the nutrients that it wanted. The moss phlox, that was rabbits again. They, I'll tell the story. I went to a visit on Garden in the Woods, and they've taken a whole 50-foot slope and totally replanted it with two different kinds of phloxes and some foam flower. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And so I got inspired and I came back and I had a small, I don't know, 8 by 10 area. And I bought a whole bunch of phlox to put in there, like 30 plants worth of phlox, two different kinds. And a week later, the rabbits had eaten it all to the ground. I mean, every single plant. So a very expensive experiment. But I love the moss phlox, that the phlox subulata, and it's I wish I could grow it, but again, the rabbits are relentless. And the royal fern, I just couldn't find a wet enough area for it, so I've kind of given up on most of the um, ferns that like a lot of moisture because I just don't have the conditions for it. Um, all right. Let's move on to the fun stuff. These are the perennials. And this was the hardest choice of all because there are so many great native perennials. And I'm showing you the penstemon, the digitalis, the beard tongue. This is definitely a meadow type of plant. It needs full sun, dry to average soils. It blooms earlier than most of the other native plants. It blooms in late June. And it is, and if you, I have a grouping of like 5 of them together in one of my cottage garden bed, and it makes these beautiful clouds of white bloom that really set the garden off. It's wonderful. So on the left-hand side there, you see the leaves, and just before bloom, you can see the iris blooming. So that's in late May, and it's coming along. The leaves are nice. Right to the left of them, you see there's some purple leaves, and that's a cultivar of the straight species. Straight, the straight species has green leaves and white flowers. The the cultivar is, I think, called Dark Towers, and it has purple leaves and pinkish flowers. I think it is less attractive to the bees than the white one is, but I still see them around. So it makes a nice. I have like 2 or 3 of those in there just as an accent to kind of set it off. I'm using this here. I'm using it in the meadow, the big meadow, as well, and it's doing fine in both places. Excuse me. I've just put some in last year at the mini meadow on Main Street, and so we'll see how it does there too. I don't think this is a Cape Cod native, but I couldn't resist putting this one in. You'll hear that theme a lot. I couldn't resist. This is Blue Star or Imsonia. And this is the one called Hubrechtii. There's another one, Imsonia tabernae montana, which has thicker leaves, but otherwise behaves very similarly. They have those really pretty blue flowers in June. They're fairly early, but they don't last very long, and I don't see much pollinator action there because I don't think they're really native to this area enough to make that a difference. What I grow it for is the foliage, is that really beautiful soft foliage that is makes a nice contrast in the garden to the other plants. And as you see on the lower left there, it has this beautiful yellow color in the fall. So, so that it's a great plant for the foliage effects alone. And this is the purple plant that I showed you at the very beginning. And it's not one you see very often. So I thought it was really would be fun to share with you today. And the name itself is wonderful, Mad Dog Skullcap. Sometimes there's a close cousin of it called Downy Skullcap, which also would be a great plant. It is full sun, average to dry soils. It goes 2 to 3 feet high. It blooms in the late summer. It does spread out, which is a nice kind of colonizes over time, and it's a pretty tough plant. I have a lot of Canada goldenrod that tries to invade the garden bed that this is in, and it has not phased it one bit. It just keeps spreading, and you see how nice it looks, with that's slender mountain mint, the white, and some black-eyed Susans, and it's in front of some Joe Pye weed in the back there, and the blooms last a pretty long time. So if you have a chance to plant this one, grab it, and I think you'll be happy with it in your sunny garden space. And here's that slender mountain mint a little more close up. It's another feathery foliage plant, kind of like the Amsonia. It doesn't have as pretty a yellow foliage in the fall, but it's still a nice. Its foliage is still nice. What's great is the white flower blooms, which is late summer. And it is, because it's in the mint family, the rabbits don't like mint very much. So they've left this one alone completely, and which I greatly appreciate. And it does spread, but not like, the garden mint that invades everything. On the lower right is a cousin of it called the blunt mountain mint. And which has those beautiful silvery bracts at the end and the tiny white flowers on it. So I have both of those in my garden. The blunt mountain mint spreads a lot more, so you have to be careful that it's a bit more aggressive. But the slender mountain mint doesn't seem to be aggressive at all, at least not in my garden. And most people categorize the wild columbine as a shade plant, but I find it grows better in my garden in the sun. So that's where I put it. It grows up in that, it pops up through that wild strawberry that's near the oak leaf hydrangea and the white wood aster. And it will self-spread itself, self-seed in any open space. So it mostly are like around the edges, or it's self-seeded into a pot, and I let it grow, in the pot. So I thought that was kind of cool too. And here's what else is in the garden. And you should have all gotten, by the way, a plant list. So you don't have to be writing all this stuff down really quickly. If you haven't gotten it, check in with that info@ccfinc.org, and we'll make sure you get the plant list. Among the failed plants is the Virginia anemone. Looked like a really lovely little plant, rabbits ate it. The sneezeweed, the helenium, I liked it a lot, but it seems to be a short-lived perennial, particularly if you don't have like a very rich soil, which I don't know about you, but very few people I know on the Cape have it. So I could treat it as almost like an annual. That's the way I treat Coreopsis, for instance. It doesn't last that long. But so I've kind of given up on that one. The blazing star, I can't, and the obedient plant, and the spider's wort, and the culver's root, the rabbits ate them all. So my list of what the rabbits have eaten is getting longer, but I think there's still plenty of stuff the rabbits don't like. And all of the things that I've shown today, the rabbits have left alone. So now in the shade is the white wood aster. I love, again, I getting a theme here. I love clouds of white flowers. So, and that's what these will do in the woodland garden. It does self-seed readily, so I planted maybe 10 or 12 of these at the very beginning of the woodland garden planting. Now I've got as many plants as I want. I can give them away. This one is a spectacular plant, and if you don't know it or haven't tried it, I would highly recommend this one. It's the black cohosh, Actaea racemosa. Used to be called Simicifuga racemosa, but they've reclassified the name. So, but you might know it as that. The 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 base of the plant, the leaves are kind of a nice divided foliage. They're attractive. Nothing particularly special, but they're a nice bit of greenery in the shade garden. But it puts out these spikes, these 3 or 4 foot spikes of white flowers, and they're long lasting because they start blooming at the bottom and move all the way to the top. They probably bloom for a month, maybe a little bit longer. And the bees and pollinators all over them. And it's a wonderful accent plant that you can use almost anywhere that it does require pretty close to full shade. So don't try to put it in a partly sunny place. Um, but you will really enjoy it. I have it in 2 places. One is along the pathway in the woodland garden, and it works great there. But I threw one in the little shady patch next to the outdoor shower, and it has thrived there. It's gotten huge because of all the moisture, of course, from the shower. It liked that a lot. And it's kind of fun showering next to all these native bees that are kind of crawling all over the plant. It's guests kind of find it a little bit disconcerting, but the bees never bother you. So another white flower for the shade. This one's an early bloomer. It's kind of like the native replacement of the astilbe plant. You know, it has the, again, similar foliage, spiky white flowers in June, grows in part shade, and none of the critters seem to bother it. And some others to consider: the baneberry, the turtlehead, the geranium, etc. Um, I love the notion of spring ephemerals and kind of beautiful little things that grow in woodland areas. So I've tried several of those. I have the trailing arbutus has been doing okay for a couple of years, but seems to be trailing off. And it I had a little bit of it left last year, and I'm anxious to see if it comes back this year. I think the drought really hurt it, even though I did give some supplemental water to the woodland areas in particular. Same with partridge berry, which is a beautiful little trailing mini vine, kind of right along the edge, like put right along the edge of the path. The bloodroot is a spring ephemeral, and it's come up almost every year, but fewer and fewer blooms every year. So we'll see how long that goes. And I blame it on the soil for all 3 of those. I think the soil in my woodland garden is very acid, and it's like, I think the pH is about 4.5, something like that. And and so even though it's fairly rich in soil because it's been under trees for a long time and all the leaves and needles have composted and made a decent soil, I don't think it can access the nutrients because it's so acid. And finally, I didn't want to leave you on a failing note. I wanted to leave you on a little more optimistic note. And that's why I'm showing you what I'm trying new this year. As I said, I've got about 125 species. Uli Lorimer's book on the Northeast Native Plant Primer, where he recommends 235 different plants to try, native plants to try, tells me I've got 100 plants left to go. So I have to keep buying new plants and putting them in, and I'll continue to report progress. but these are the ones I'm trying this year. There's a shrub, there's a native shrub, honeysuckle shrub, that is just now become available in the nurseries. Blue Stem Natives and Garden in the Woods both carry it this year. And it's a northern bush honeysuckle. It gets to be 3 or 4 feet high. And I've got a new shrub border that I want to put a couple of those in and see what happens there. I also have a nice place for a tree in one more tree in the wooded area. It's relatively moist because I'm lying fairly low and we're not that far from the water table. So I think the tupelo, which likes moist soils, will be happy there. I'm trying a new grass. This is not native to the Cape, but is often used in meadow mixes. So I'm going to try a little bit of that in the meadow. I found 2 new goldenrods that I want to try. After all, I call my garden Goldenrod Garden, so I feel obligated to try various kinds of goldenrods, and they don't all spread on you like Canada goldenrod does. The Solidago bicolor is a white one, and the Solidago odora is fragrant. So those will be interesting to try. And then I have a new ground cover called Heal All or Self Heal. It grows in my lawn. It's one of those things, little weedy things that you just wonder what that purple flower is. Well, with a little bit of digging, I found out it actually could be a really interesting ground cover for sun. So that's what I'm going to do. The end of a island bed is in the sun. So I'm going to buy half a dozen plants and put them in and see if it really can become a nice ground cover. So more and more plants every year. And I think it is all adding up, getting back to the original goals of the kind of biodiversity, but in a way that is still a designed garden and with lots of design interest, not just kind of a messy kind of woodland area. So I'm having fun with it. I hope I've given you some ideas about things that you might want to try for your own garden. And with that, I think we're ready to stop and take questions.
So to answer the first question we had in our chat box, will the slide deck be available? And the answer is yes. The video and slide deck will be up on our website sometime soon. I don't know when.
I will warn you, the slide deck is like 160 meg. It's giant because of all the photos. But yeah, it certainly will be available.
And then one of the questions we had was, do you trim back the grasses in winter or just leave them alone?
I trim back the grasses in spring, probably in April. There are couple ways to do it. One is you can take a mower to it, set pretty high, like 6 inches, and cut it all down. You could take hedge shears and kind of go in and crop them up. Or the technique that I often use is called a chop and drop, which is you need gloves on to do this. You take all the grasses and the stems of your perennials in the meadow, I'm thinking in particular, but this works in a garden bed too. Just break them off at like 6 inches and break them up and just drop everything on the ground. And that becomes like the compost. It turns into compost on the ground and all the other plants will come up out of it. But yes, I leave it until spring. I don't take it down in the fall. I don't take anything down in the fall because the insects and bees and all the others need that litter mess and all the stalks to overwinter. And I'm trying to encourage their habitat, not take it away. And if I felt that if I was cleaning up in the fall, I'd be taking their habitat away and I'd be breaking the life cycle. So I leave it all till spring. By spring, I have a whole lot more energy too. So by November, I'm done with gardening for the season. So that's another reason.
Okay. Somebody asks, do you have any fencing for the rabbits or deer?
I do. chatting with some folks, and we kind of all agreed that rabbits have this magnet for new plants you bring into your garden, and they try all of them. And so to protect against that, particularly for shrubs, I will put a fence around a shrub until it gets big enough and the stem's thick enough that they're probably not going to bother it. So that might be 2 years. I do that. For perennials, if it's a patch of perennials, I might put a fence around that. I don't put a fence around each perennial. There's a spray that is a rabbit repellent, and I'll use that for the first month or so. And then if the rabbits try it then and eat it down, then I'll know that that's probably not, well, no, the rabbits like that plant, it's probably not going to survive. But but after a month or so of using this anti-rabbit repellent, if the rabbits leave it alone, I'm all pretty good. But I do have a fence around the entire meadow. So, yeah.
Hey, and Molly just mentions that her blood roots all relocated or reseeded themselves from the soil. I planted it into sandy, stony soil near the house foundation. And she
Oh,
comments,
cool.
I think they like limestone. So,
Ah, so that may be why. Maybe I need to add some lime over there.
okay.
That's a
And
great suggestion. Thanks, Molly.
Dan says, would you amend the shade soil to adjust the pH?
I'm going to try that this year. Yeah, because I'm tired of things just petering out over there. So we'll see. I'm going to use pelletized lime because I think that takes longer. It'll last longer in the soil. And so you will hopefully, and I'm going to plant a few more things over there and see what happens. Because I've generally tried to avoid amending my soil. But I think in this case, I'm going to have to, because I think that pH is just too low for anything to survive.
Okay, and Nita's comment is that it's a bit of a warning that Tupelo needs water, not just moist soil, and it likes its feet in fresh water. Marshy areas are best like the banks of a stream.
Okay.
So
Okay, that's
I don't know where
interesting.
you're planting your Tupelo, Kathy.
Well, as I said, my whole property is fairly low. I think and the next one house beyond us is wetland. So the clethra, which also needs a good bit of, moisture and it just kind of languished for a year or two, but then all of a sudden it started really growing. I think the roots finally got into the groundwater, that groundwater layer. And I'm hoping that's what happens with the Tupelo. But thanks for the warning. Maybe I'll move it down a little bit closer to the wetland than where I had in mind. That's a great suggestion. Thanks.
Okay, so I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. And if you have other questions, you can send them to info@ccfinc.org. I put that in the chat box. This is our last winter webinar of the season. We will have a couple of webinars scheduled in April during Earth Day to Arbor Day. And so I encourage you to look on our website for those. And if you are interested, you can follow us on Facebook, sign up on our website for our e-newsletter. And there's also a place to volunteer if you're local. If you have any other questions, I've got a couple more messages. Everybody says thank you, informative as always. And thank you everyone for joining us. So have a great day.
And thanks everyone, and happy gardening.